Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Orange Pill Podcast. My name is Graham Elwood with my Bitcoin baseball jersey here in the Orange Pill studio. Beautiful things. I've only done this show for 1,000 years. All right. Ready? Here we go. This is why I love live. I like it live. You never know what's going to happen. This is, why is that in the shot? I don't want that in the shot. We're going to put that here. Welcome, folks. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for everybody in the chat. Like, share, subscribe. Put this out on your social media if you are watching, ladies and gentlemen. And we got a very exciting show today. A longtime friend of mine is here who's going to tell us his story about when he came to El Salvador like almost 10 years ago and the difference from what he's seen and his orange pill journey. And then we're going to talk about, where we see things going. He also started we both started in comedy together. So we've got some insane stories. So we're going to get into all of that. And if you're watching on the Orange Pill YouTube channel, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell notification button. And if you're watching on the Orange Pill, then also we are currently streaming on my YouTube channel as well, youtube.com/Graham Elwood. So like, share, and subscribe on that. And make sure you're following all of them. And then, of course, @OrangePill is our Twitter handle. And all of the Twitter handles are scrolling below. So check that out. I think Bitcoin just is around 68,000 right now as I was checking before the show. We hit the all-time high. We just tickled the all-time high, just tickled it. And then a little bit of a pullback every time you get to an all-time high. But without any further ado, let's bring our guest onto the show. He's a longtime friend of mine. We know each other doing stand-up, but he also works in the finance world. I'll let him explain that to you. And he's here in El Salvador for his second time, but his first time in the post-Bukele era. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show, Bob Gillespie.
Thank you, Graham Elwood. Why do we always do those voices? It's always the voice.
Well, we started out on the road together as comics when we used to have to do morning radio.
Yep.
And we'd be in some town in Omaha or whatever, and we'd have to be like, it's Button Boy and the Doctor or whatever. It was rocking and rolling.
It was always like Johnny Gut in the Goop.
Yeah.
Like it was always like the second was always like, just one stupid word.
Johnny Gut. I remember in the Goop, it was always these morning radio guys. And it was Bill Dwyer had a joke in his act. He was always like the two guys. And then the woman had a regular. It was like Johnny, rat face in the Goop, and Helen doing the weather. That's Bill Dwyer's joke. And so Bob and I met doing stand-up in Chicago a long time ago at an open mic at the Who's on First Comedy Club in Elmhurst, Illinois. Mm-hmm. Very class. I just remember a gray, dark room.
It was like a VFW, like an unkept VFW hall. That's what it was. Like bad carpet and folding chairs, and it was absurd.
The gigs we did too. I mean, I'm not making these. The audience is going to think we're making this up. We're not. The Comedy Womb, which is where all comics were born.
Yep.
And that club was like a birthright.
Yes.
Like you had to, and nobody crushed there. It was always tough shows.
Yep.
But you just you got to do the Womb.
Yep.
You get $40, $50 a show, or whatever it was.
And you cut your teeth there, man. That was, and it was always 8 comics maybe, and 2 real good ones, and new people that were starting. But everybody who has ever been anybody coming out of Chicago, like the Womb was like it's called the Comedy Womb for a reason, right? It was the womb of really all of us, kind of in our generation of comedy.
And so I remember you and I worked with Bill Leff, who now is like a pretty big radio personality in Chicago.
Yeah, he's like the Ray Rayner. He's got a TV show now too, where he does if people don't know Ray Rayner, what am I talking about? Do an older reference, Bob. It was like Fatty Arbuckle.
He's like the W.C. Fields of radio. It's what.
Yeah, but he does kid shows and introduces clips and like a morning show. Mm-hmm. But yeah, he's a great comic. Great comic.
I remember we worked with him, and he, God dang, it was so funny. So one of the comics on the show did a really bad.
Oh God, I remember this.
He did an impression of
Nick Nolte.
And then we
terrible impression.
Awful impression.
It
was just it was one of the, here's the sign when you know the impression's bad. When you don't know who it is until the comic says who the name is. We're just like, hey, I'm Nick Nolte. That could be.
I think it was like, you're a piece of shit, Davidson.
Yeah.
Nick Nolte, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, no, it kept saying Reggie from...
Reggie, that's what it was.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hey, Reggie. And it was like...
You're in a $4,000 suit and you're still a piece of shit.
From 48 Hours? Is that what you're referencing?
Yeah, I think that's what it was. Yeah.
And then we all did Nick Nolte impressions to make fun of this guy.
Right. Every comic, like 8 comics in a row.
We all just get up there and went, "Hey, Reggie," we all just did bad. And then for the Late Show, I think I went up there and did like, I'm doing a Richard Crenna impression.
Yes, I think that sounds right. Nobody knows who Richard Crenna is.
He was in Rambo. He's the Colonel Chapman in Rambo or whatever. He's like, train eat stuff to make a Billy goat puke. Like he was that guy. If you're going to go after Rambo, you better bring one thing. What's that? A lot of body bags. And he walks out. So we did all these Richard Crenna impressions. And when Bill Leff got on stage, and the show, it's 12:30 at night in front of 16 people. And he goes, "It's Richard Crenna night." He goes, "Where'd the year go?"
It was just last year, wasn't it? Just. And then I think he did a joke. He goes, "Last night it was Richard Crenna Eve."
Yeah, it's Richard Crenna. And he did like 5-10 minutes on Richard Crenna night. God, he was funny.
Yeah.
He was hilarious. So we came up, it was Chicago in the early 90s. I graduated college in 91. I moved there, and that's when I met you. It was 91, 92-ish. And then we just did every open mic. We tried to do every gig we could. We would drive to Milwaukee for guest spots, and we would hey man, I'm making $50 in Manitowoc, Wisconsin or whatever.
Yep.
Which is a really cool experience. And so we've always kept in touch, and we've both done a lot of traveling, but you've done an excessive amount of travel. You've done like 67 countries.
Yeah,
is that
67. Right? Yeah. Yeah. And I lived in England London for like 2 years. And then I lived in Istanbul for like on and off for like 2 years. So I've lived internationally twice. And then this will probably come up, but next year I'm moving to Costa Rica. So I just always really enjoyed living internationally. And then when you live internationally, it's really easy to be like, oh, well, I'm in London and it's a $49 flight to Ireland. Or
it's a little tighter.
Sorry, buddy, bring it in, buddy. There we go, buddy.
Yeah, and so that's the thing. Like you and I share this, like traveling internationally, and like I've been to Costa Rica, and we both are doing all right with our Spanish and working on our Spanish. So when I said I'd come down here a couple of times, we spoke over the summer after I'd been here the first time, and I was like trying to raise money for this movie, and you were like, "Man, I was in El Salvador a while ago," and you're like, "Isn't it dangerous?" And I was like, "Well, no, actually." We're coming up, it was late March, I think, of 2020, 2 years ago, and Bukele, I forget the name of the law, but locked up everybody. So I want to hear, I've heard from local Salvadorians what it was like before Bukele, but I want to hear from somebody that like, not just a tourist, but you're someone who travels for a living. And when you travel, I've noticed the way you travel, you're not, you'll do some tourist things, but you really like being in the culture.
Yep.
You don't like just like, where's the McDonald's? Like you don't.
Yeah, where's the cathedral? I'm going to go see the cathedral, and then I'm going to go to the other thing that you're supposed to see, and I'm going to go see some paintings, and then I'm going to go stay at the Marriott. Like that. I'm like, let's go see the one thing, and then let's go to a soccer match. Let's go to a pub.
Yeah.
Let's go and let's hang out with people. Let's find out what they're like. Like to me, I like to low to the ground travel is how I like to do it. Because otherwise, it's not an experience. It's just check boxes.
Yeah, the tourist stuff is cool. There's cool stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's great to see.
But you're right. There is that experience of just like, sitting, especially when they're speaking a different language, and you have to kind of figure it out. You have to sort of like, how do I communicate this? And I always feel like Google Translate is the last option.
Agreed. I'd rather stumble and be terrible with my Spanish
than do that. Unless it's like really critical, then it's like, all right, I'll pull out Google Translate. But that's sort of part of the journey. You and I are very similar. Like this, like I had to figure this out, and this crazy thing happened. We met this guy, and he met, like it's like. Not like getting into trouble, but just like experiencing what that culture was like. So, you've traveled a lot. You're an experienced travel, but you came down here, and what year was it?
I thought it was either 11 or 12. And it was I think we got down here it's the girl I was dating at the time. It was, I think it was Christmas Eve through New Year's Day. So it was during the holidays. So for about 10 days. And I've read a lot. One of my hobbies, I guess, hobby or study, I'm really interested in conflict, historical conflicts. And then when I like to read a lot about a place and then go there and then and sort of see either what's it like before the conflict, what happened after the conflict, where are they now? So I've been to Cuba with the revolution there. I've been here. I've been to Guatemala. I've been to did I say Cuba already? Yeah. I've been to Sarajevo with the Balkan War. I've been to Serbia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and Croatia. And like, if you go there, you get a completely different view of that war depending on which one of those places you're in.
It should be noted too, then you're obviously not like, you're not reckless, but you're not afraid. You're not like some Americans who are like, I'm not going, it's scary.
Let me tell you this. I've had one bad thing happen in my travels in my entire life. One thing, not like, I had a shoe stolen on the beach or whatever. Like I've had one bad thing happen. And it was in Salzburg, Austria. You ever been to Salzburg, Austria?
Pretty nice.
It's Mozart and The Sound of Music, and it's idyllic. And I had a guy pull a knife on me there. But like I've been in Central Havana, Cuba, where the streets and water, that's how you get your water. And the one bad place, the one thing that had bad happen to me was in Salzburg. And I looked at the guy like, they gotta be shitting me. Like, what? The hills are alive with the sun. He's like, yeah.
He pulls a blade on you.
Yeah. And then two cops just tackle him. Nice. So yeah, I'm not reckless, but I'm relatively, fearless is I'm not a tough guy or anything, but I think people are people, and by and large, as long as you're not sort of in the wrong spot, that you can kind of go anywhere.
Yeah, and also too, I mean, you and I met in Chicago. We both kind of grew up as kids in Wisconsin, but then you live in Chicago, and you're in a big city. You got to play heads up ball. You have to living in a city like that. You have to kind of have a radar on you, and when you travel, you have to kind of be like, I'm getting a vibe here that
you have to listen to your head for sure. Yeah. Like, this feels hanky to me for whatever reason.
Yeah, I don't have a good vibe. Let's get out of here. It's not worth the photo op or whatever.
Guys, you walk into a place and they, and you get that, they don't get. Not white people, I'm not saying that, but they don't get anybody from outside of that little bar community, and they look at you like, oh, what's that guy doing here? The small town Wisconsin sort of, you have the same problem in small town Wisconsin. Hey, that guy's different than us. We're going to kick his ass for no reason.
I mean, there's bars in Chicago you could walk into and they're going to go,
yeah, hey, what are you doing here? You're not, you're not from this neighborhood.
You're not from this neighborhood.
Right. So you got to listen to your head on that kind of stuff. But yeah, I came down here the first time, I've been to every Central American country. And, I had a wonderful time in all of them. So came down here and, we did a little bit of the tourist trail. We went to Xochitl up there, and I really wanted to go see that because, that was sort of, there's some of the rebel stuff that, that was one of the strongholds rebels up there. And then also much further to the east. So
let's get into this a little bit. One of the things you studied about this country specifically was the Civil War from 1980 to 1992.
Yep.
So you wanted to be knowledgeable about that when you came in. You and I are very similar. I read all this. When I went to Afghanistan to entertain the military, I read like the history of Afghanistan. I read The Kite Runner and was like, oh, wow.
Yeah, I read that book too, yeah.
It's a great book. So coming into this, and reading that book then basically kind of colored a little bit where you wanted to go, right?
Absolutely. I wanted to go see the things that were in the book. I wanted to go see the things that were, that were meaningful to that. Mm-hmm. And I do that everywhere I go. And then the great thing about that is, an example, when I lived in Istanbul, I would talk to people about Ataturk, and the Turks would lose their minds that I had taken the time to know their history, and how, at the end of World War I, when they're carving up Europe, that the Turks are like, no, you're not carving us up. You're not doing this thing where the French and the Italians and the English and the Americans, you guys decide that our country is two countries, or we'll just continue to sit in our foxholes, and the war's not over in Turkey. What do you think of that? That happened. And Ataturk was sort of the driver of that. And, but anyway, I know we're not in Turkey, but it's knowing that, then the locals are like, holy shit, you took so much time to learn about us. And then then you're not there and you're completely clueless about it. You've got a frame of reference to come into a place and then really start to absorb even more details. Right?
That's a great point before we get into what you saw. But this is, and for anybody out there, if you've never done that much traveling, I urge you to travel in these ways and to do a little reading, because I've found that in so many places when I've been to Japan, I've studied a lot about Japanese history, I've studied Japanese martial arts, I'm familiar with the Edo period of the samurai, and when you say that to people, they go,
right, they're amazed that you know that. Yeah.
You don't just come over there and go, where's the sushi?
Right, I heard you guys make good stereos.
Yeah, it's not, having traveled to Hawaii a lot as a surfer and to do shows. And I read about the history of Hawaii and how the islands were illegally stolen in 1893 and you know, who Eddie Aikau was, and Eddie would go and Hawaiians would be like, hey, thanks.
Right.
Like they
They're so appreciative. It is, yeah.
Because unfortunately, there's a lot of tourists, especially American tourists, that are just like, don't know anything and just travel and are just like, wasn't this part of Disneyland?
Right.
And you're like, no.
Here's a thing that can backfire a little bit on you, because in some countries, in particular, if it's a big, giant, important person in their history, right? Ataturk's a good example of that. Mustafa Kemal was the guy's name, but wonderful. He's their like George Washington.
Right.
But he did die of alcoholism and, you know, at a pretty young age. And I made a mistake of asking somebody about that. And they're like, no, like this guy was, you know, a saint. And this guy was like, okay, but like there's a book, like the 900-page book I read, it was kind of a big theme, you know, it's not
just like, no, it wasn't.
No, it wasn't. Right. Like, because either they just aren't taught that or they, you know, just like our country, they gloss over things. Whereas, you know, this English guy.
Name one thing America's glossed over.
It's all very, he chopped down the cherry tree and he never told a lie. He didn't have slave's teeth in his mouth. No.
Find me an American who can tell me who Smedley Butler is, Eugene Debs, Fred Hampton, and they have to really have dug deep because none of those people are taught in the school.
Fred Hampton, I believe, was the guy who won the junkyard in that show, correct?
Sanford, yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, he was.
Sanford, isn't that what you were talking about?
Yeah, Fred.
Lamar.
And the big one's coming.
And then, yeah, he did that funny jokes, and then Chicago PD and the FBI shot him because he was a Black Panther.
Right.
Remember that episode?
Yeah, I remember that. Was funny. Good humor.
Good. So, no, that is like, I remember encountering some of that when I was in China of just like, yeah, Chairman Mao. And some people were just like, he was great.
Right. Yeah.
And you're like,
okay,
great. And I can't judge them because again, there's Americans that are just like, in Reagan or whatever the guy is.
Whoever your guy is.
Whoever your guy, even JFK, I'm Irish, he's great.
Yep.
I think he was our last great president, but the Kennedys.
Yeah, exactly right.
Joe Kennedy was a bootlegger, you know?
Yep. I mean, I think that there's, we talk about you and I knew this was going to happen. You and I was going to get on a jag and this it's been an hour and a half later. And we're like, and then the Cubs pitching is good. And then people are like, what the hell is going on with these two guys?
I know we got to be careful not to make this just about baseball, but that's why we're a baseball jersey. I'm like, we could talk about the Cubs all day. Anyway. All right. So that's to set the backdrop of that's the kind of traveler you are. You like to read stuff and research. And so part of your research wasn't just like the history of Latin, but specifically in the Civil War for me, because it's very pertinent because for people who don't understand, so there was a Civil War from 1980 to 1992, roughly. The United States under Reagan very much helped contribute to this awful Civil War. There's a massacre that we've like.
And I'll say this, that's not like a left-wing thing. That's a fact. It just is. And you're a lot more left than I am. Mm-hmm. I'm not right. You know that. So I'm not, you know, but that's the thing that when people are like, well, I don't know if that really happened. Oh, no, it did. Like it's a documented fact that we back that terrible.
I mean, we could go with it. I have a whole nother podcast called Government Secrets with Lee Camp, where we just go through like all of the evil dictators that we backed, all of the Democratic, like, so anyway, there's a history then. Why it's relevant too is because then after that ended in 1992, then the kind of gang violence took over. So this country has been in basically 4 to 5 decades of war and violence, which is why this rebirth under Bukele is so like, wow, look what he's done in 2 years. It's hard to undo 5 decades of violence in 2 years. So you've studied all this. You're in this country in 2010 and 2011, roughly. What did you see? What did you experience?
Yeah, so the first thing we did is we landed, we took a car, we drove up to Xochitoto, like I mentioned, went up there, and beautiful lake up there. It's gorgeous, very idyllic. And then the next day, I wanted to do a tour, like a horseback tour, and go up into the mountains and the jungles and go see things. But the reason I did it is that the guide was a rebel. Like he lived. Like he took us up and showed us like, oh, and then when the government troops would come and like built into the side of a hill, he like pulled a door. Like it was like something out of like a movie where he's like, yeah, and then you look down in there and there was a hole. And he's like, we would go get the village and then we just put everybody in this hole and then they would hide until the government troops left. He was like one of those guys that like, he was in the hills for like, he's about my age. So you figure 80, how was I in 80? He's a little bit older than me because I think he said like 81 to 86, he was in the hills. And he was 16 through 23, maybe 21. How the math works there. I'm not good at math, Graham, you know that. Strong. But like the guide was a rebel. And I'm just like, I'm completely blown away by it. I'm just asking him so many questions. He's like, yeah, here's where he hit people here. And this is what it was like. And we would, we'd have to try to get food and scrounge. And then, so I was just, like talking to this guy. And then you realize like what a wuss I am. Like just, imagine me, I was in college being an idiot at his age. So we did that. And then the other thing that was really cool was that afterwards I was talking to him, like after the tour, we're coming back to town. And I'm like, so what was it like being, in the hills? And he goes, it was even harder. That wasn't hard. What was hard was coming back and then being like, I need a bank card, or I don't know what an ATM is. Like the reintegration into like society after that, he said that was the really, really hard part. So, I thought that was fascinating. And then we took I think it's called the Rutas de las Flores, I believe it's called, the Route of the Flowers. And then that goes over to, is it Uea, I believe it's called. That's over in the west part. That's like the gastrointestinal capital of El Salvador. The girl that I was dating at the time is a chef, and she wanted to go see that. And then we came down to the beach for a few days, and we came back to El Salvador and flew home. So it was great. But you kind of got to do a little bit of the beach, a little bit of the history. Did a volcano a day, but did the rebel thing, which I thought was that to me that's like the most like memorable thing that happened was meeting that guy. That was pretty incredible.
And then you told me a little bit before the show, but to tell the audience some of one of the things people didn't understand, like extortion was just a daily routine. It was just a part of doing business. Everybody had to, just about 70% of the population or more roughly had to pay whatever business you ran, you had to pay off somebody. I mean, you had to, and the violence, I was told, Reina Chicas, who was on this show, she's with Me Premier Bitcoin. If you haven't watched that interview, please go back and watch it. She said, the gang violence affected you knew somebody. I was just talking to somebody in my Airbnb she's Salvadorian. And she said, yeah, my boyfriend owned a gym. He had to pay. And he had a friend that owned another gym or something. And that guy said, I'm not paying anymore. And they killed him. And, as I've also said on the show, it's important to notice that roughly $5 billion in extortion money was paid every year by Salvadorians to the gangs. And so when those guys got locked up, the GDP is 28 billion, roughly 20 to 30%. Everyone got a 25, 30% pay raise, basically is what that's like. But I don't think people understand. I've talked to Salvadorians about it, what it was like for them, but to see then as a tourist here, and you weren't naive, you knew where you were coming and how to play it and not be dangerous, certain neighborhoods. But tell us as a tourist what you saw, what you were told and all that. Yeah, and I
the two things that I remember like pretty distinctly about it was we rented a car for part of the trip, and then we took a bus because I like to go lower to the ground, and you hop on a bus with people, and you got that chicken. It's I like daily life stuff. But when you were on a bus going from say San Salvador to Uea, apologize if I'm not saying that right. I think it's Uea, actually. Uea, I believe it's pronounced. It's J-U-A something. It was 11 years ago, Train. What do you want from me? But we took a bus. And every town we would go through, or if we went through a bigger town, every neighborhood we would go through, you would pull up at a light, or the bus would just stop, and nobody would get on and nobody would get off except like a teenage kid, always like a 14, 15, 16-year-old kid. And he would hop on the bus and he would shake hands with the bus driver and he'd hop off. And I'm like, I watched them, was watching, and I'm kind of taking it all in. And finally, I was chatting with this guy next to me, and he just goes, there it is, there's the toll. And I go, the toll, what? He goes, yeah. When a bus goes through your neighborhood, you pay the gang in that neighborhood a toll to go through their neighborhood. So that handshake is that guy handing that guy $1, $3, $4, whatever it might be. And every public bus paid that toll at that intersection 24 hours a day, every single day. So, wow. Yeah. And it was constant. Go through, 2 stops, 2 neighborhoods, 2 stops, $2, whatever. I didn't get the amount. To clarify the audience, because people might be going, wow, is that country of 6.5 million people? How do you come up with $5 billion? Like that. Right. And a large portion of the population takes the bus. Yes. Yep.
So that's the only way to get around. So you have to pay this.
Yeah, and the bus is not going to go through that neighborhood, and then you go through a different neighborhood, and then you just got to pay that gang in that neighborhood. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So that was the first story, and I was like, oh wow. And I knew about the extortion and the graft and stuff down here. So that happened. And that was that was more like in the central part of the country, in Salvador, on the, that stuff. But then even when I came to the beach, I was staying at a Tommy. For the people who don't know, it's one of the really nice beaches here. And
Atami is close to El Zonte, which is Bitcoin Beach, to give people a reference point.
Yep. So we went to a pretty nice restaurant. If you and I probably drove by it last night, but it was dark and I didn't see it. But there's like one like really opulent, unbelievable restaurant there. And then there's one that's sort of like not run down, but more of a local mom and pop kind of place, but it's right on the water. So you pull off, you're on the beach, you're looking out over a beach and a bluff and a little local cuisine. And we go in and it's just us. We're just sitting there and the sun's going down and I get a drink and the owner comes over and he's kind of talking to us, the proprietor. And we're just chatting and, guy's real nice. He sits down and he's like, hey, guys, here's another beer for you guys. I'm, finishing up right now and we're talking to him. And once again, now this is a time when Americans weren't coming here. So it was very much like, hey, like, what are you guys doing here? And this is awesome that you're spending money. So then this, once again, 16-year-old kid comes in. He goes, oh, hold on a second. Goes in the back. He's gone for 10 minutes. He comes back. He sits down. He goes, yep, that was my tax right there. That's the tax man. And I go, wait, the 16-year-old kid's the tax man? He goes, well, it's the tax man where, it's $500 a month for me. And I said, I understood it a little bit, but I go, well, what happens if you don't pay? He goes, oh, they'll burn us down and they'll shoot me. And I said, really? He goes, yeah. He goes, I'm not joking one iota. Like, they will burn this down and they will shoot me 100% of the time. And I said, I mean, it's like Sopranos. It's like Goodfellas, right? And then he said, that the opulent place down the street? I go, yeah. He goes, I think they pay like $2,500 a month, just off the top. And that's not your mortgage or insurance. That's your insurance, right? But I was here 8 days, and I talked to two people about, and those are two things that I saw like with my own eyes that were just stunning to me.
And again, just add the numbers up. The small place is paying $6,000 a year.
Yeah.
A small little roadside restaurant is paying $6,000 a year.
And their dishes are $8 a dish.
Yeah.
Like, it's every penny the tax is every profit that you make. They just leave you enough where you can make them $500 more. But if you could if you think they could pay $550, it'd be $550. And if you fix it up and now you're getting $600, now it's $600. Like, they suck every ounce of value out of the business. And that was it was rampant down here.
Yeah, and again, the other business, the nice place was paying 25. That's $30,000 a year. The nice place was paying. So you really see how that $5 billion a year is not that hard to get to when you're doing. I mean, a bus route.
Yep, every day. 15 buses go by every day and have to stop 35 times to pay $1. Do the math on that. Every day for hundreds of buses.
Yes. So there's hundreds of thousands of dollars per bus per year, whatever. And then you add, and again, every restaurant is paying. You didn't find the only two. Everyone is paying this.
Yep.
Everyone is paying this. And again, everyone's, and like I said to my neighbor who told me they had a friend who was like, I'm done paying. They killed him.
Yep.
That's no joke. That's how violent it was. And so, you saw it firsthand as a tourist, and which is why not a lot of tourists were coming here. I know there's the only Americans who were really coming here were just like a lot surfers I knew would come here, but even surfers I talked to would be like, we'll go Nicaragua, we'll go Costa Rica. Probably not going to surf. They would just pass through here on like a Latin American surf trip and like surf here for 2-3 days, get out. I mean, Michael Peterson that created Bitcoin Beach, the first circular economy in this country. I mean, he told a story when I was on his podcast about 5 years ago. There was a kid that worked for him that got shot 40 times right outside his place. There was like a gang war. I mean, one of the things that spurred the Bukele locking everybody up was right around this time last year in March, or 2 years ago, sorry. Bitcoin Beach was starting to thrive. Michael Peterson can tell the story better than I can, so I'm going to give the broad strokes. But the Bitcoin community was starting to thrive. And Bukele had already passed the law. He said it was going to happen, I think, May of 21. It became in effect September, I think September 7th of 2021, Bitcoin became legal tender. And the gangs killed some people down at Bitcoin Beach, and kind of like a
we don't have to listen to you kind of thing.
Yeah, we're running this country.
Right.
And when that happened, if I understand the timeline correctly, then that's when Bukele, they had a special session and they were like, that's it. And they started rounding everybody up, and he rounded up, I don't know what the number is, but like 50,000 people in 3 weeks, and then got the bulk of it. So, because you couldn't have done the Bitcoin thing without the ending the extortion.
I think that had to start first. Yeah, for sure. It's like I've been to Colombia too, and the stopping now. The thing is, when you stamp it out in one place, it goes somewhere else, right? So you stamp it out in Colombia, now it's in Mexico, right? The cartels aren't going anywhere. People like drugs, so you can have a war on drugs all you want, but there's going to be
when there's 10% of the richest country to your north,
everybody wants drugs.
Like there's 300 million people.
Yeah.
330 million Americans. And if 10% of them, that's 30 some million people who want drugs and have a need for them.
You're not going to stamp. It's stupid. So anyway, but the same thing happened in Colombia, is where they, first they had to go to war with the cartels before they could turn around the economy and do other things, right? That's what you had to do. So a similar thing here is they had to clean that up first, probably.
Yeah. So, that's an amazing story to hear that, is you as a tourist. So let's get into I always ask everybody, what's your orange pill journey? How did everyone has very few people are just like, oh, I read about Bitcoin and there was a ding, I got it. Like most people are like, I didn't get it at first at all. So tell us your orange pill.
Yeah, so it kind of goes with what I do for a living.
Because you work in finance. Yeah, tell me what you do. You work in finance.
Yeah, so I won't bore you too much with the whole biography, but autobiography, I guess, because I'm talking. I went to college, I majored in computer science, then I got out and started doing stand-up with you and all of the guys we started with. But I had this, I could write code, I could do computer stuff. So unlike a lot of comics, which, I was a little bit lucky in some fashion, is that I could be, as I started to get booked and go on the road, I could take my computer and be like, well, I'm going to write code from 9 a.m. until 6 o'clock at night. And I'm going to make software developer money, and then, work on my act, and then I'll go do shows. So I was a little bit different than a lot of comics in the fact that I had, I sort of had that thing. And then eventually what happened is about 11 years of doing stand-up, like I'd work my way up. I was headlining and I was working 45 weeks a year, and I'm, I think 48 weeks on the year on the road. And then I had the chance to start my own software company. And I was like, well, I kind of can't go on the road now. I got to make my decision. So, and I made the right decision. I decided to get into that. And then, we did very, very well there. And then I kind of knew I could do that. And then I started a second company, and that one got really big. And then the third one, and then we sold that. And then I'm like, all right, well, now I don't want to do that anymore. I want to get into venture capital, because instead of being the entrepreneur, I wanted to be the investor and then invest in, at this point now 70 companies that I've led the investment on. And I wanted to work with 70 different entrepreneurs and help them with, what I know, and raising money and all that kind of stuff. So I kind of got into finance. Well, when you're around 70 entrepreneurs, you're going to see things before the normal society sees them, right? So eventually, probably around 2012, a friend of mine who's always on the cutting edge of everything starts talking to me about this Bitcoin thing. And I'm just like, okay, I don't know. But he's a guy that when he talks, you're just like, oh yeah, okay. If Josh is talking about this, you're going to listen to what Josh has to say. So it's a little bit he started an ISP out of his dorm room in 1990. I'm not shitting. At 21 years old, he had an ISP, and I think he sold it for $600 million as a 23-year-old. He's like, hey, this internet's a thing. I should set up the ability for people to have the internet at their house.
When I was 23, I was getting free drinks at the Comedy Cafe in Milwaukee.
Yeah. I was, I don't know what I was, 21 years old. So he did that. And then he's like, hey, the internet's still going to be a thing. So I'm going to go buy a shitload of domains. So he bought 13,000 domains, and then he sold those, depending on what the domain was. He eventually owned Chicago.com. And then blessedly, he gave a bunch of us, I'm from Chicago. I don't know if you mentioned. Yeah, I think you did.
Yes,
yeah.
we're from Chicago.
So my email is, people can email me if they want. Tell me I'm not entertaining at all. Bob@chicago.com. I got that email address, which is phenomenal to have. But Josh was working on that. And then he's like, hey, I'm working on this Bitcoin thing. And I'm like, well, shit, Josh sold his ISP for $600 million and he's domain, like whatever this is probably gonna be a thing. So he starts explaining it to me and I'm like, he's giving these words I don't understand. And I'm like, is there a dungeon master? Like, I don't understand, because that's what it sounds like, right?
No, I love everyone's like first reaction to Bitcoin. When I first heard
it, like a fucking wizard on a coin or whatever the fuck it is.
This, and I was just like, I'm sure the Loch Ness Monster's got his own coin too. You kids have fun with your little rainbow cookie or whatever.
And even now, it's still just like, all these discords and all. It's just, it's a lot of deep nerds, and the coin's got a picture, and they, Merlin is a thing, and it's like a fucking. Is there a dungeon master? Is there?
Yeah.
Like, what's going on? I got a ghoul. All right, I don't know. How many hit points do I have? I don't have any idea what's going on.
I got to collect like stars or trophies or what do I got? Coins?
Do I have to get a potion? So I'm talking to him, and then and he was doing it so early. And he still does it. And then he got into mining. And then with what I do, he's like, hey, Bob, can you help me model out some stuff? I do a lot of financial modeling stuff. He's like, hey, man.
Somebody in the chat put the coin master.
the coin master. So then he started like calling me about my expertise and being like, hey, Bob, I need to put together like a financial model or put together these things that I do, term sheets and boring shit, cap tables. And so I'm like, well, I can do that, but I need to understand what you're doing. So I started, kind of as I helped him model out things, I started to pick up like what Bitcoin crypto is all about. And then my first story though of a Bitcoin is fantastic. We're at my house. I remember it distinctly now. We're at my house and we're having like a little dinner party. And he's like, hey man, just bring your phone up. Cause like I've been doing the modeling for him. I've been doing all the financial modeling for him, but I haven't mined. I haven't bought it. I don't know anything. I'm just, yeah, Josh, tell me how it works. Put in the numbers. I'll figure out how, So he goes, bring up your thing, download this wallet thing. And I'm like, whatever. And I download it. And he's like, yeah, and ding, ding. And then all of a sudden I have a Bitcoin, right? I look at it and it's, I don't know, $620, I think maybe at the time, something like that.
This is 13?
2011, 2012, 2013. I don't remember the exact, it was about that time. Right. And I look at it and I'm like, Josh, he's giving me $600. And he's like, Josh doesn't need $600 from me. So Josh is like, yeah, man, don't worry about it. That's cool. He's like, no, you get the drinks and, whatever. Just, I'll tell you what, you throw in an extra couple hours of consulting. I'm like, yeah, great, Josh. Well, it's found money. I don't know anything about this. He's like, yeah, you back it up to a thing and you get and I'm like, yeah, I'll do this. I'll do it, whatever. And then you don't, right? And then my phone dies and I'm like, whatever. And then, later on, I'm like, that's a $67,000 now. That's good. So that was my very, very first thing. Now, I would say this, I because it was found money, when it got to, I don't know what number it would have gotten to, but I would have sold it at that point, right?
I'm sure when it hit its first big bull.
Like 16,000, I remember being like, where is that phone at,
Yeah. In 2017, when it had that big bull run up to 20,000, probably would have sold it. So, but
I have, people around me that, I probably have 4 friends, including you 5. I'd call you loosely a friend, quite honestly. By the way, for the people watching this, we spent almost 24 hours together. I need a break. So
I was like, I got to surf this morning. I can't handle any more of this stuff.
So I got, 4 friends who were deep into it. Like dudes back then they would take a power strip into work and they would plug their graphic cards into the power strip and then plug the power strip into the wall and they would mine at their desk during the day. Like using free energy from their company. And the company is, what is that? It's a charger. I don't know. Nobody cared. And they would mine at their desk with graphic cards plugged in. And they had pictures of it. They show it to me. So I have at least 2 friends who then, bought a pizza for 12 Bitcoins. Like I had two friends who were like, I bought I had a pizza, but 12 it's $12. Like I've had those friends that did that. I'm like, that's about $1 million pizza.
It's $1 million pizza.
Yeah. So that's how I got into it. And then, when you're just around finance a lot, I've started to see solutions, not just the coins, not just, not just the tokenization or the value, but, how do we write things to the blockchain that then have value? So, if you think about it, getting paid in Bitcoin for the utility of storing information on the blockchain is why you get given Bitcoin. The miners say, hey, everybody, I got a node, and if you give me some information, I'll put it on the blockchain. And when you need it back, I'll give it back to you. And by doing that, I get a little bit of Bitcoin. That's my reward for doing it. Mm-hmm. So for me, at least initially, it was very much like, okay, this blockchain technology is like an immutable database that can't be hacked, and it's a public registry of information. Well, that's super interesting to me because, like, you bought a house, you've got a car, title insurance. Hey, Bob, we got to pay $3,000 because we got to go to the court room or the court building and find out if somebody else has claim to your property. Didn't you just do this when the guy before me bought it? Like, you're going to go to the court? Like, okay, we did it when I bought it, and now I'm selling it. Nothing happened. So the blockchain is like, why isn't all that just on the blockchain?
Right.
It's just put it on there and say, that's Bob's house, that's Bob's car, whatever. You make your last car payment, and they mail you your deed for your car. Right. What? Yeah, just put it on the blockchain and says Bob owns the car now. And then when I take it to somebody, I go, yeah, pull it up on the blockchain. They go, oh yeah, Bob owns this car. You're sending me a piece of paper that,
It's very, very analog. It's very phone booky.
Yeah. And if you think about in finance, I'm solely focused right now on real estate technology. That's what our fund does. So think about that, like with properties and all the paperwork and all the stuff that goes into a financial transaction is why can't that be put on an irrefutable, unhackable public database, which is what blockchain is. So that's kind of how I got into it, was because I see so many, and also I know this is a Bitcoin podcast, but cybersecurity. I was way ahead of knowing about that kind of stuff. Right. I was way ahead of video games, understanding that these video games are going to be rich, detailed things that you can download to a computer instead of having to go to the store, and thousands of people are going to play at once. I saw that coming way before anybody else. Well, not anybody else, but people like that. Streaming, like Netflix. I'm like, oh, that's going to be a thing. Like right now we're mailing around DVDs. But later on, you're going to click a button and that movie's just going to show up at your house. Yeah. So when you're around a lot of technology, you learn a lot about different technologies. And, AI, cybersecurity, video games, Bitcoin, they're all these emerging things that we're not even starting to scratch the surface of that I just got involved with because I have to know about them. Mm-hmm. And then there's the ones that I think, aren't as interesting. But I think that, clearly I think that, that this is a big giant thing that is in the very early innings.
Yeah, it feels like one of those things like we don't even know yet. Like it's when the Wright brothers did their first plane, were they thinking about the space shuttle when they did that? Or the first car, were they thinking about this like Tesla or whatever, a Formula One race car? Were they even conceiving of that? No. Yep. And I think that's where we're at. I think it's like we can sit here and go, okay, it's cool. And, we're in El Salvador where, you can buy stuff and there's a circular economy here, which it feels like Bitcoin is more suited initially for developing countries like El Salvador. So because you and we've had this conversation and I've had this conversation with numerous like Bitcoin people is like, in a first world country, we all have access to banking. That's it. That's not a problem. Right.
And we don't have hyperinflation generally.
Yeah, we don't have hyperinflation generally. So like, for instance, we had the Minister of Education on this program like a week or two ago, Mauricio, and he was talking about one of the things that Bitcoin is really helping with is a lot of the people out in the rural areas didn't have access to banking. They're an all cash economy. It doesn't make sense for them to take a 4-hour bus ride to San Salvador to get a bank account. They're just not going to do that.
Right.
But they all had smartphones. And this is the thing, one of the things that kind of 5 years ago, when I first started hearing about Bitcoin, this was the thing that really made me wake up to it when they said, I interviewed someone and they said, there's 2.5 billion people on planet Earth that don't have access to traditional banking, but they all have a smartphone. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, that's how this is going to be huge. And specifically going back to El Salvador, so it helps those people. And the government is doing a whole education thing. They're putting it in the schools. And there's a company, Me Premier Bitcoin, that is educating people on it. But also there's the remittance thing, which is a very key element to discuss specifically with El Salvador, but it pertains to the whole world. As we go back to the Civil War, in the Civil War here, all these El Salvadorians left. Roughly, they estimate roughly 3 million Salvadorians live outside of the country, primarily in the US and Canada, some in Europe. And you saw that when Bukele was on the election day, the embassies around the world in the US, lines around the block of Salvadorians going to vote. They've all been sending money back here for years, having to pay Western Union, huge fees and all that stuff. And so now it's like, oh, we're sending Bitcoin money very cheap, very, there's lightning and all that. And that is like, to me, is really, that's the exciting stuff. And learning about the circular economy that they started in El Zonte. They're doing it now out in Berlin, which is nicknamed Bitcoin City in the eastern.
Also a great dance club that just closed in Chicago, Graham. You've been there.
Yeah.
For the people who don't know, it's great. It's a wild place, man. It was remember that dance club Berlin? It was like cross-dresser, trans, gay, but like that kind of place. But before anybody was even like that was an accepted sort of open society where people are like, yeah, why would that bother anybody? It was like remember that? Anyway, I'm sorry, I blew that up.
But we went to all those crazy nightclubs in Chicago.
Because it just closed. It literally just closed, yeah. So when you said Berlin, I'm like, are we talking about the nightclub?
The Chicago.
They take Bitcoin now there? Boy, they are on the cutting edge there at Berlin. The trans guy takes Bitcoin now.
So that's the thing that's really interesting. And I know you've only been here like not even a full day yet. And I was trying to pay for dinner last night, but I didn't have enough in my Lightning wallet and I had to move it. But like, you're going to start to see more of the circular economy. So as someone that's really working in tech and finance, and you, like you say, you get to see access, you have access to stuff that regular people don't see. So you can see this trend happening before it becomes mainstream adopted. And like you say, we don't know where this is going because we can't even foresee it, you know? Like we're in the black and white TV era. No one can foresee like watching a movie on this, So but as someone that's in tech and you work with all these tech people, where could you possibly see this? I know you're talking about blockchain contracts and all that, which is really fascinating too. That can revolutionize real estate, medical records, all that other stuff. But where could you possibly see this go?
I'm going to give you like what I thought. Here's a humanitarian use case of this with blockchain. I thought was fascinating. I was at a conference and I'm looking at all kinds of stuff, right? You're looking at somebody who's, there's startups, like I tell people, you in LA and there's an actor in LA. In Chicago now, it's like you go and your waiter's an entrepreneur. Like it's just like everybody's an entrepreneur. He's got their startup idea. So I'm at this conference and I see this guy. I think I was in New Orleans for this, I think. And he's like, hey, let's say that you're in a war-torn country in, I'm not going to pick on a certain continent, a country. And it's, there's a civil war there and you lose your home and you lose all your documents and you lose everything. And you go to the border and you're like, hey, I'd like to get out of here. And you're trying to get to the U.S., let's just say. And the U.S. is like, well, we don't know if you're one of the good guys or the bad guys. And you're like, yeah, but I'm just Bob, and I owned a bakery, and I don't have a criminal record, and I'm me. And they're like, yeah, but you could be Jeff, who has been committing genocide and death to America. So we don't know which one you are. And you're like, well, I don't have any of my. I don't have anything because I don't have anything. Now, let's punt the privacy concerns here because I think that this is where it gets complicated. But wouldn't it be amazing if you just put your fingerprint and then on the blockchain, you're on there and they go, oh no, that's Bob, he's good. Like proof of existence, proof of self, proof of like, and not like clearly there's privacy concerns and then do we start tracking people? Like we don't know enough yet how that'll shake out. But from just a pure humanitarian standpoint, you can kind of be like, okay, when something terrible happens and we need to have like proof of life, proof of existence, proof of agency, whatever it might be, that you're like, no, it's there and it's irrefutable and it's public and like I said, with privacy concerns. But now Bob's Bob and Graham's Graham, and that's it. And to me, I thought that was like a really amazing sort of way to think about where this could go. And I know that, we've got a lot of things to figure out. And when people, I'll say this and then I'll stop talking. When people start to be like, yeah, but then what about the privacy concerns? And what about this? And like, Bitcoin's bad because of that. I'm like, that's not, blockchain is not the problem there. Bitcoin's not, that's just a problem.
Well, you and I are talking about this too. Like when people say, well, Bitcoin's been used for criminal activity. And the U.S. dollar never been used for crime.
Yeah. And you know what? Used to be carrots used to be traded, or tulips, or
cacao. In Latin America, it was cacao.
Exactly. Whatever it is, whatever has value that can be traded for, child pornography, human trafficking, drugs, is going to be used to trade for those things.
And actually, there's great evidence. It was, what was it, 2 years ago, a year or two ago, when there was the hack. They hacked a pipeline or something like that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And the way they caught the guys was because they used Bitcoin, and it's very traceable.
Right.
Because there wasn't, duffel bags full of US cash that they stole that you can never find.
Right.
It was actually, and now as Bitcoin becomes more institutionalized, you can track, there's a signature for every coin out there, every piece of Bitcoin that's ever been purchased. Yep. So unless you mined it, and then you send it wallet to wallet, okay, great. But most people have to go onto an on-ramp to some sort of financial institution to convert it to some type of fiat or something, or even like you have to, even if you're in a circular economy, which El Salvador's adoption is like, it's not even close to 100%. It depends on the city or whatever part of the country. But I know people here working in now, there's like a Bitcoin economy here. I know people that are working for companies, not just some restaurant owner, and they're getting paid in Bitcoin, and they're renting their house in Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. You can pay your electric bill in Bitcoin here and all that stuff. And they're like, most of them are like almost out of the fiat system. They're sort of unique because El Salvador is the country that legalized it. But even they're they paid their gas bill. They paid their taxes in Bitcoin to El Salvadorian government, so that's tracked. So that's the thing of like, it isn't this thing that's just used for criminals.
No, not at all. It's just a stupid argument to make that like, man, it's used for bad things. Okay, well, so is a screwdriver. Like, what do you think in the world are you talking about?
But cars.
Well, yeah, it's just
people have been abducted in cars and trafficked in cars, and cars have been used to deliberately smash things. So we're going to outlaw.
We get rid of cars. Yeah.
So yeah, that's amazing. That's a cool thing to think about. Well, we're almost going to wrap up here. Is there any? I guess you're talking about moving to Costa Rica, and there are some Bitcoin bubbles in Costa Rica. There's bubbles all over the planet now, and they're growing. And Me Premier Bitcoin has their curriculum now in 21 languages. What would you like? And the thing that I'm really drawn to by the people, the Bitcoiners that have come down here, is they're like, how do we help? How do we give back? I see they're a little different than the crypto people. Some of the crypto people are just sort of get rich quick, buy a Lamborghini with whatever Dogecoin. Mm-hmm. The Bitcoin people that I've met here, not that people don't want to make money, but they're very much, I see more like, how do we give back? How do we go build this? How do we help the locals? And you and I were talking a little bit on the car right here. So like, how would you like to give back? How would you like to contribute? You were talking a little bit about being in Costa Rica and coaching. And
yeah, we
got to talk about coaching, because tell everyone who you are from the lineage of coaching. So
sports. We didn't get into sports on this yet, but so my grandfather is a guy named Gillespie. He's literally arguably the most, as coaches know him, people don't know him because he coached at a division NAIA school. But there's been 2 books written about him. He's literally one of the greatest coaches in the history of coaching anywhere at any time.
Isn't he the winningest coach in like Illinois?
He was until the guy passed him. He was the winningest college baseball coach of all time. He won 1,900 and plus games. A guy finally passed me, like 88 years old. Here's 2 stories about my grandpa really quickly. In 1997, and I believe he stopped coaching in maybe 2010. In 1976 or 77, I think it's 77. 1977, he goes 35 and 37 in baseball. So he's 2 games under 500. Okay. That's the last time that he had a losing season from 1977 until 2010. 33 years in a row, coaching 2 sports, football and baseball. He was not under 500 for 66 seasons in a row. And I think in 110 total seasons, he had 6 seasons under 500. And then he was at Joliet Catholic, which which is a big powerhouse in football. They won a bunch of state titles there. He was coaching that team and coaching a football team. Like in a 7 or 8 year period of time, he won 3 College World Series and 5 football titles, like in 10 seasons. One guy. And when they would play at Catholic, they would win, like at the end of the year, they would be like total up the scores. Joliet Catholic 230, other team 16. Like, I mean, so that's my grandfather. Then my dad was a college baseball and basketball coach, and then now my brother is the women's basketball coach at Illinois State, and my uncle coached at Florida A&M, and my cousins the women's coach at Illinois State. So it's just sports, like my whole life.
And one of the things that you and I connected on is we're obviously we met during comedy, then we both like talking sports, and then your coaching lineage in your. And I learned, I never played organized basketball. I played pickup basketball, and we were in Chicago in the 90s when the Bulls were just dominant. We watched a lot of basketball. And I always say I loved watching basketball with you because I learned so much about the game because you're like, oh, they're running a screen. That's a triangle offense. It's a pick and roll. They're doing. I was just like, wow. And then I met your dad, Coach Gillespie.
It's unbelievable. Like his knowledge, it's just.
I was like, I always said, if I ever did a movie where I played a basketball coach, I would hire your dad as a consultant.
yeah, because he's all the funny, like Bob Knight without throwing the chair and without all the terribleness of Bob Knight. But that's what he was like. Storming up and down the sidelines, giving the refs a hard time. Wildly successful coach. Everybody else in the league hated him because he would beat everybody all the time. It was just, it was a lot of fun. So one thing about giving back is I never got to coach and never got to do it because I took a different journey and did stand up and did what I do now. But I love sports, and my son's 18 now, and I loved coaching him. So one thing, basketball is the second most popular sport in Costa Rica. So I thought when I go down there, it'd be really fun to set up to have for free, just to have kids come play basketball. And what do you need? 5 basketballs in a hoop and 10 kids, and teach people jab step and ball screen and just teach the basics of the game to 10-year-olds.
Passing, just those fundamentals, like team basketball, dude. You got to do that. That is awesome because that's something too where you can get people to participate. People would be like, "Oh, I'm donating. They need shoes. I'm sending you a box of shoes. Like, what do they need? Jerseys? Like, we should contact the company that makes this Hodlers International, and they make this jersey. You can get them out of. They're ship out of Canada, so they ship to Canada and the U.S. They just made a new basketball jersey. Anyway, I'm getting way ahead of myself, but I love. You would be an amazing youth basketball coach. And the kids would just be like, and I know your family and stuff, but when you just now explained your dad, your grandpa, I'm like, I always go, that's right. Like you're Gordy. I knew about your grandpa before I met you.
Yeah. I've had grown men. I have one of his jackets, one of his baseball jackets, and I'm shoveling snow, and the jacket on, I go shovel snow. I had a guy pull over in his car and said, "Hey, where'd you get that?" And I go, "Oh, it's my grandpa. It's Gordy Gillespie, my grandpa." And he literally said, "Is this gonna be weird? Can I hug you?" That's what he said to me.
When I played Pop Warner football in the 8th grade, one of our plays was it was called the Joliet Catholic Right. We took out of that playbook. Everybody knew they were unbeatable, unstoppable in high school football in Chicago. I mean, when I played high school football at Evanston Township High School, Chicago area high school football is a big deal. I played games in front of 5,000-6,000 people. Bo Schembechler was at a game my brother played in, but everybody knew who your grandpa was.
Everybody knew Gordy, yeah.
Everybody knew Gordy. Everybody knew Joliet Catholic. In Chicago, they call it Joliet Catholic.
Yep.
But, in the movie Rudy, somebody plays your grandfather.
Yeah. Rudy played for my grandpa in high school. So Rudy went to Joliet Catholic, and it's a guy plays my grandpa. It's right in the credits, Coach Gillespie, and a guy plays him, and it's amazing. Yeah. Here's a good story about it. My grandpa was actually upset about it a little bit in the movie. Did you hear the story?
Yeah, you told me. Tell the story though.
So in the movie, if you remember, if you haven't seen Rudy, it's good little film. But it's about, people don't know, this kid Rudy. Later on, he was kind of just told he was dumb. You're just dumb. You're just a dumb kid. Well, he had ADHD and dyslexia and had, a learning disability. But he always had a dream of playing football at Notre Dame. And everybody told him, you can't do that. You're from this, you go work at the oil refinery, dipshit.
You're too small.
You're too small. Yeah. And, at 6'2", 210, not Notre Dame. Right. You're not 6'4", 280. You can't play there. But it was his dream, and nobody ever believed in him. And my grandpa sort of was one of the people. It wasn't just him, but said, you can do anything you want to do. Mm-hmm. So but in the movie, Rudy's arguing with his brother in the movie, and his brother is telling him, this is a stupid dream. You're never going to be able to do it. You're never going to be able to make it. And Rudy says something like, that's just because I don't remember the exact thing, but you've never been tough enough to understand this. That's why Coach Gillespie always said you were a pussy. And when my grandpa said that, he saw that. He just said, he was so upset because he's like, I've coached for 62 years. I've never called a kid a pussy my entire life, not one time. So that was what my grandpa, it was too bad because, he's such a marvelous person. And just to have it in a film that he called a kid a pussy, really affronted his sensibility because if Gordy, that's he's literally, if you're the dumbest kid on the planet, you can do it. If the best you can do is get C's, you get C's. God, nice, great job, man. That's awesome. He was one of those people. Right. And, he would never have said that, but it's just funny that that's, that's what came out of Rudy for him. He was pretty upset about it. So, yeah.
Well, that's awesome, man. This has been a cool conversation.
Are we going to stop? We can keep talking.
I know. Well, we'll keep talking at dinner.
All right. Excellent.
But thanks everybody in the chat for somebody tuning in. What's this? My dad and granddad were great. That makes me great. Maybe, I don't know. Dan Quarterman. Well, thanks everybody in the chat. Like, share, subscribe. And so, Bob, I know you're not really on social media, but tell people if they want to get a hold of you, where they. Yeah,
I'm. It really. If you email me, I'll email you back. My email is bob@chicago.com. I'm on LinkedIn professionally. Kind of stuff like business wise. If you have a real estate technology solution, if you are into you're trying to raise funding, if you're questions about venture capital and kind of how that's. So what I do is I work for a venture capital firm and we invest in real estate technology companies. So if you got a question on hey, I got an idea about prop tech, how would I think about that? I'm good. Or if you just want to tell me I'm boring, whatever. Do you ever get those? You ever get those? Just, hey, I saw you on that podcast. You suck. Oh, thanks for typing that.
God.
I'll pass it on to my boys. I'll pass it on to my boys someday.
Yeah, it's just the number of shitty things people got to say to you on the internet. You're just all right.
You're boring. I'll have that crocheted on a pillow. Thanks.
Yeah. So you went out of your way to watch my thing and then complain about it? Is that what you did?
Right, for an hour and a half?
Really? Wow. Because if I saw something and wasn't that into it, I would just watch something else.
Yeah. No, I email them and just tell them that they suck.
Yeah, I wouldn't do that. Thank you, everybody. And we were talking in the car real quick. I'm excited about our little Chicago Cubs.
Little Cubby Cubs.
We watched a lot of Cub games back in the day.
You and I were at Game 5 of the World Series together.
That was one of the coolest things ever. Being in Chicago, they were down 3-1, and everyone in Wrigley was like, just don't let the Indians win here. Lester was on the mound, and we were like, they won. We danced in the street. I remember we ran into Mike Siegel, who was down there, and I think my friend Sam Levine might have been there, but we ran into friends. I saw Jeff Garland at that game.
Yeah. You and I ran into him there.
Yeah. From Curb Your Enthusiasm. He's like, all right, Graham, and we're dancing in the street.
Was that your Nick Nolte or was that who was that? Was that Nolte?
Nick Nolte.
He sounds exactly the same. Jeff Garland and Nolte, I didn't know were the same guy.
I think the Cubs are going to win this year, Reggie. Yeah, those are
your two impressions? Man, you're good.
It's solid.
Yeah, you're good.
I got good voices.
Yeah. You're good. Could you do a little Nicholson for me?
Yeah. Reggie, we gotta go watch the Cubs play.
Just the same. Oh, dude, sorry. We're going to go long. Can you do, what was the impression you do Godzilla? Okay. You ever talk about that?
No, I've never talked about that.
So do Godzilla doing Nick Nolte.
Right, here's my impression of Godzilla as Nick Nolte. All right, it's going to do some acting stuff. I got to get ready. Hey, Reggie. So yeah, that's
So to give context to that, when you would get mad at a crowd, for the people watching this, Graham would get mad at a crowd in some shitbone town that hated us. And Graham would just, instead of doing any material, he would just go, oh, I'm sorry, you guys don't like my jokes. Let's do impressions. And then you would start with Godzilla. You would just do Godzilla.
Yeah.
And then you would do, let's do Godzilla as, and then people would start, and then the comics would start yelling out actors, and you would just, hey, dummy.
Yeah, Godzilla as Elvis. Hound dog. Like that was all I would do. And it was such a fuck you to the crowd. It was just like, if you're gonna be assholes, then this is the show you get.
And the comics, that's a comic thing that we would just love it. Because then you're not doing comedy. No. You're doing comedy. You're pushing, you're trying to say, okay, fuckers, what is comedy?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you like impressions? Because here we go.
You want some dumb impressions? I'm going to give you the dumbest possible impressions you could ever have.
And then we would talk about it in the car for ever. Oh, God, you know what you could do next time?
I did. People would go, yell some out. People start going, Captain Kirk. And it was,
And you would close with, and this is when Andrew Dice Clay was really big, and you would close with, that's what you would close with was Godzilla, as Andrew Dice Clay as Godzilla. That's what you'd close, that's your closer. And I think it was something like, who's Godzilla fight? Rodan? Is that a thing? Was he fight? And you would do something like, Rodan, I fucked him.
Yeah.
The Dice Clay thing. You would smoke the
Rodan, I fucked him.
The dumbest shit in the world.
The dumbest thing. I'm going to bring that back.
Oh, Godzilla. God, man. That was.
I think my next special, I'm going to do Godzilla.
No, for sure. For sure. I still think it's the funniest thing you've ever done. It's good that the best thing you've ever done, you peaked at 23 when you were angry in Racine, Wisconsin.
1993. That's the best year I had. Oh, God. So great. Well, dude, thanks for coming on the show. Folks, if you want to watch, my comedy special is available at grahamelwood.com. And I recorded at Zany's Comedy Club, where we both started. Bob was in the audience for this show, and I cut away to both of our headshots are at Zany's Comedy Club. You see my headshot from when I was 22 years old with a vest over a T-shirt. So it's a very exciting time in the early 90s.
That was the outfit, man. I think I got that same headshot, buddy.
That was the outfit with acid wash jeans or something like that. Well, Bob, thank you for being on the show. And thank you guys for watching the show. We usually do live streams 3 days a week. And of course, you can support our show with one of our sponsors, which is swanbitcoin.com/orange pill. You get $10 of free Bitcoin. They're a Bitcoin only exchange, no shit coins. And that is Orange Pill Podcast. So follow us, like us, share, subscribe. And what we do with this show, if you're new to it, we take the whole hour. We'll leave this live stream up, but then we'll clip out the little subject we talk about. Obviously, the Godzilla clip is probably going to be the best one out of the whole hour. And we put that up on there.
The next time I'm on, that's all we do, by the way. We just do an hour of Godzilla and impressions. And I don't do impressions, and you don't really do them either. We just do an hour of that next time. So if your podcast doesn't blow up, then we just do that to your audience, just an hour of it.
So yeah, that's what's going to happen. Bob, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for coming down. This is really cool, man.
Thanks for having me, bud.
And we appreciate everybody. Watch the show, like, share, subscribe, do all that stuff. And we will see you next week. I believe Max and Stacy are back next week. So they might be having them back in person. Thanks for watching. And that's our show. Buy Bitcoin, stack sats.